Hi, my name's Thete, and in this video I'm going to be taking a look at the benefit of the start collecting boxes from the point of view of beginning an Age of Sigmar army in a cost-effective way, because that's the way you would normally approach them. But first, if you'd like to make sure that you get notifications for further videos in the series, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'm going to be coming at this from the point of view of, say, a player wanting to play Age of Sigmar but not sure which models to buy. So hopefully you have an idea of which army you'd like to play. It might be that you play an army in Age of Sigmar and you want to start a new one. If not, I mean, the advice usually is to have the models you would enjoy painting and playing with as good a start as any. Because let's face facts, I know some people go, but which is the more competitive and so on. If you're thinking about competitive armies, you're thinking about entering tournaments, and by the time you're entering tournaments with some genuine expectation of serious success, by that time you will have already worked out these things and you could have moved on from your first army anyway. So we needn't worry about the relevant meta, and also by the time that's happened it would have changed anyway. We'll be in another edition. Whether third edition is coming this year or not, it will be coming by then. So it's always tricky to judge anyway, because things change, new battle tomes come out, it shakes things about. Points values, just rejigging the points values can change an awful lot of things. There will be factors to the new edition of Age of Sigmar, whenever that comes out, that will inevitably make certain rules more powerful than others. And besides, tournaments are disrupted to varying degrees around the world. There's some places like Australia where they've been going at pace, and other places like the UK where it's like you can't even get down to your gaming club, thanks to the rise of Nurgle. Actually, that's the point. Just embrace the plague and play Nurgle, or whatever you most fancy. But being honest, this hobby is, like, on one hand, it's actually quite reasonably priced as hobbies goes. But on the other hand, it can be really expensive, and it very much depends on how you go about it. You know, like, so you're going to want the battle tome, which in my money is about £25. Then you'll want to build up a 1,000-point force fairly quickly. Then there's the painting side of it. Now, as I've already said in my particular case, forget it, not doing any more painting, or at least not of models that I intend to use for playing. But generally speaking, that's what you'd intend as well, and that means getting paints and so on as well. So there's that initial outlay. And you want to get yourself a 1,000-point force quickly as well if you want to be playing the games at, say, your local club. 2,000 points is the gold standard, but 1,000 points is better to start with. And now that there are rules, as of last year, to really play 1,000-point games effectively, and that's quite good. You can start with less, of course. Indeed, some people do. They'll start off with 500 points or 750 points, but I think you want to move on fairly quickly from anything less. Now, if you browse the Games Workshop stores or website, you will notice, for example, these start collecting box sets. Now, in terms of getting a force together quickly, they represent good value for money. That's why they exist. It's like, here's an army in a box. But the thing is, when you start learning and playing more games, or just learning and playing more with that army, it'll be nice to win the odd game now and then. You don't expect that to begin with, you just want to play and learn. But eventually the idea is you want to try and win the odd game. And so those start collecting boxes will then be of more or less value depending on the army. So some are decent. You know, the Slaves to Darkness one, the Skaven Clan's Pestilence, the Flesh Eater Court set. You know, the models you get in that, you would probably continue using those even as you expand and refine your list for the games that'll get you the odd win. Some of them can form the backbone of a reliable list, but you will miss out on the odd unit here or there. None of them are bad. None of them are objectively bad, however. And so if you're on a budget, you could start with them. But if your budget runs to be able to afford models without having to go just for the bargains, if you're not talking about, you know, having to wait 4 months before you can buy one more box of models, then you might want to consider each one on its own merits. So, you know, if budget is an issue, I'd also recommend looking up independent stockists, by the way. So, you know, in the UK, we've got Goblin Gaming, Element Games and so on, who offer discounts on quite a few of the popular box sets, including the start collecting sets. But it's not limited to the start collecting sets. But you've got your battle tome and you want to decide which units to take. And I would always start with that. I wouldn't necessarily get the battle tome and the start collecting set, unless you were just going to go, do you know what, I'm just going to cobble together a random army, and if I don't like those units, I'll just get other ones later, in which case, fine. But the first thing to consider is what those units are going to need to do. It's Age of Sigmar, fancy battle game, but it is essentially fought over objectives. You need to get to these objectives and you need to hold these objectives. Sometimes you need to push your opponent off an objective to capture it. So the game is essentially one of moving around the board, bullying your opponent off some objectives while stopping them getting to the ones you have already captured. So you want units that are tough, units that are fast, a hero that is able to buff nearby units to make them more powerful, and you need enough units to realise and maintain board control. All too easy to get what looks like the best units, only to find you've got a really tiny force and it can't really get around the board much. It can go over to one objective and boss you off that, and then they've lost the game by the time they get to another. Even a very powerful unit can only be in one place at a time. Except Marathi now, I guess. You also need to consider some essentials. So you need a hero to be a general, and you will need 2 battle line units, for a 1,000-point game. At the back of the battle tome, the list of units indicates what type of units they are. Some simply state battle line, or that they are battle line for your army, but some of them can be battle line, but it depends on certain conditions. Usually if you take a particular hero as general. So if we take Daughters of Khaine, for example, which I do, Witch Elves and Sisters of Slaughters are battle line units, but Blood Sisters and Bloodstalkers can be battle line units. So if you take a Bloodrack Medusa as general, they are battle line. Now, do note that the Bloodrack Shrine is also a Bloodrack Medusa because it has the Bloodrack Medusa keyword, so that works too. And keywords are always worth paying close attention to for how units are defined. They're not just the fine print at the bottom of the war scroll, they are important. So if I wanted a Daughters of Khaine army and I bought the Start Collecting box set, I would get the following model. I'd get 5 Melusai. So they could be either Blood Sisters or Blood Stalkers. I could make either a Cauldron of Blood with a Bloodrack Medusa on foot, or a Bloodrack Shrine with the various Priest and Avatar of Khaine models on foot. And this is where you may have an issue with using the Start Collecting set, because that would give you quite a lot of different hero choices. You are getting 3 hero choices out of that, no matter how you assemble them. But only 1 battle line unit. And that's not uncommon with the Start Collecting sets. But the bulk of the model is in terms of the hero. You're only getting 5 models that are your unit. And only then if you make the Bloodrack Medusa your general, however you've assembled them. So let's say I assembled them as a Bloodrack Medusa, a Hag Queen on Cauldron of Blood, a Slaughter Queen, and 5 Bloodstalkers. That would be 560 points now. So I'd need another battle line unit. Again, someone may give you a game that's round about that and just whatever, just to learn the game. That's fine. But you've moved on from that. You're learning the basics. You want to be playing the games properly. So I might decide to buy, say, 3 boxes of Witch Elves, at which point, the cost has ramped up anyway. That would take it up to 860 points. Then for another 140 points, for 1,000-point force, maybe I get another unit of Bloodstalkers. Or perhaps I get another Start Collecting box because I go, well, I'll use the Bloodstalkers or the Blood Sisters for now, but I could make up a Bloodrack Shrine for later, so it's still worth it. I'm going to use all that stuff. But either way, apart from the unit of 30 Witch Elves, there isn't a lot in terms of numbers. So when I want to capture objectives, which is a numbers game, and that doesn't mean to say you need a horde army, but you want some units that can manage on their own. You want different parts of your army that can split up to take those objectives. So that would be a powerful set of units, but would it have the board control? Now don't get me wrong, it's not bad, and it's certainly good value for money. But having fewer heroes and more troops, so to speak, is going to end up being better. But I would still base the army around a core. So to begin with, you'll be learning the game, so you don't need to perfect lists from the outset. But of course, you may, at some point, you'll have learnt the game. You may even have learnt the game by now, and it's the other list, you just kind of start a new army. And then you try and make this, and you do the Start Collector box, you do that, and then you decide that you're unhappy with how a unit is performing. But with the start collecting boxes, you decide to stop using a particular unit, and sometimes the box is still good value for the rest. But some box sets are only good value if you end up using everything, at least on a regular basis. You might swap out the odd thing and it's still worth it because occasionally you use it. But if there's a model that just ends up collecting dust from there on in, some start collecting boxes all of a sudden are not necessarily worth it. And if you've got some less ideal but still decent units with the rest of the set, all of a sudden it hasn't worked out well. Another thing to consider for the start collecting boxes is some give you a very solid battle line set of models for the future and some do not. So the Daughters of Khaine one that I mentioned contains a single minimum size unit that won't always form an effective unit in many lists. What I mean is they're battle line under certain conditions. They aren't a must take for the army. In fact, they're not a very common take for the army. And you may decide you don't want to take them. So your starting army doesn't form part of your the core part of your more advanced armies. You could easily get, and also, it sounds like I'm saying if you're doing Daughters of Khaine, don't get the start collecting set. That's absolutely not what I'm saying, because again, it is worth it just from the point of view of the general collection, but you're not getting that solid battle line choice. But I mean, that can be okay. It still allowed you to get into the game. If we take an example, let's say the Khorne Mortal set, the start collecting Goreblade Warband box. That's really good. It's superb. You get 5 Blood Warriors, battle line, 10 Blood Reavers, battle line. So you've got 2 minimum size battle line units. They're reasonable. You also get 3 hero models, as well as a non-battle line model in the form of a Korgorath, which I really love. And then another example of a good start collecting box would be one where you have the options for how to assemble them. So there's undead ones that are really good for this. So the Malignance is a cracking one because you've got a big old hero model which has a few variants. And you also have a unit of cavalry which has 2 variants. That being said, future-proofing that one, not sure how long it's going to last, because we've got the new Death Battle term coming out this year, and it may well be that at the moment, you have a Legions of Nagash army and you can mix in, you know, that cavalry, for example, you could make them Hex Wraiths or Black Knights, and that's fine. You can have Hex Wraiths and Black Knights in the same army. Maybe that won't be for the long term, who knows. But, you know, the Clan's Pestilence, that's another good one, and that is one that is future-proofed from this point of view. You've got 20 Plague Monks, which is a nice solid core there. You've got one model which can either be a Plague Claw or a Warp Lightning Cannon. And you've got another one that can either be a Plague Furnace or a Screaming Bell. So it means you could get several of those boxes and not be wasting the model kits, you know, as you expand your army. And some are such good value that you'd get them even if you didn't need all the units. So the other undead one, the Skeleton Horde, great example of this. You get a Mortarch, of which there are 3 variants. You could get, and that would cost £48 on its own in the UK. The start collecting box would also include 10 infantry in the form of skeletons, 5 cavalry in terms of, again, Black Knights, or I think you can convert those to Hex Wraiths as well. And that's just £7 extra. So let's say you were looking at this, and that's 2 battle line choices, but you're looking at this and you think to yourself, well, I'm not sure I'd want the skeletons. Doesn't matter. If you just wanted the cavalry and the Mortarch, it works. In fact, quite frankly, if I just wanted a Mortarch, and I might use some of the others later, it's £7 extra, I would get that. It's still cheaper than getting the Mortarch and the Black Knights or Hex Wraiths separately. Much cheaper. And you get the 10 skeletons as well. Although, again, like the Malignant box, not sure how future-proof that is. You know, with the Soulblight Gravelords later this year, don't even know if new models are coming out or the rest of it. But in general terms, when it comes to these box sets, it comes down to this. They're good value compared to the cost of getting the units individually. If you like all the models in the box, absolutely you get it. On the other hand, when you think ahead with the hobby, by the time you've built up your force to the point where you're happy with it, and you know, if you're playing 2,000 point games, that could easily mean you've got 3,000 points worth of models. The cost savings will not be that significant. Unless, as I say, you bought a load of them to make your force. But the only ones I can think of where you would definitely get loads of them, maybe the Skeleton Horde one, but you know, Khorne Demons, absolutely, you can get loads of those and make good use out of everything. Or the Clan's Pestilence, again, that's another likely one. So I'd certainly say I wouldn't be swayed by trying to build an army around the start collecting box. The reason the start collecting boxes exist is not Games Workshop saying, well, this is a good solid set of units that everyone who collects that army wants to take. It is Games Workshop saying, these are some sprues that represent, you know, something that we produce a lot of. We can fit it into this box. And do you know what? It gives you at least one battle line, maybe under certain conditions, and a few heroes and something. That's why it exists. It exists not from this is a good route into that particular army, although some of them are. It exists because it's just something to get people into the hobby. And, you know, I would build the army around models that you like and are happy to play. Because if you are a new player and you get a start collecting box, you're sort of taking a leap of faith anyway. So unless you need to really count the pennies, I would be thinking, well, just look at what would be 2 battle line units you like the look of, maybe an infantry and a cavalry, say, a hero that you like the look of. And if you're taking a leap of faith anyway, go from there. And if it turns out that the start collecting box will save you a few quid, you could always get that later anyway. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And until next time, I'll see you later.